Apparently this week I'm starting, which is always a brilliant situation. Tom, what episode are we up to? 16?
18.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I can't count. We're up to episode 18 of Almost in Focus. As you can tell, this is a podcast that doesn't really know what it's doing or where it's doing or when it's happening. This week we have a guest, so it's not just me and Tom waffling at you, and it's kind of an interesting topic. It's print swapping. Tom, can you do the introduction since you've been the man doing all the hard work and I've been the man drinking the tea?
I'm also drinking tea, but yes, there we go. So this week we're joined by Sam Faulkner. Sam, we've not actually met before, but we've had a little bit of a chat online, and you were recommended to me through Simon Roberts, who we had on a couple of weeks back, when you set up your print swap app. So we'll have a little chat about that.
That'd be great.
I know a little bit of your work, but do you want to sort of just sum up yourself in some way?
In some way, gosh. Where to start? So I started out doing documentary photography, and when I was, I must have been in my early 20s, I took myself off to Afghanistan with a friend, and kind of the idea in, I think 94 or something like that. And it was during a period of the civil war over there, and I kind of had this idea that I wanted to be a kind of documentary photographer, a reportage photographer in the kind of footsteps of giants, the Magnum guys and Don McCullen and people like that. And, for me, kind of just going to Afghanistan and trying to find a story felt logical at the time. I'm not sure if my parents felt quite that way about it. But so I went over there and shot some work, and I think I shot 6 rolls of film in 3 weeks or something. So not an awful lot, but it was enough to win me the Ian Parry Award, which I think you guys know about, the award for young photojournalists set up by the Sunday Times Magazine, Aidan Sullivan, in memory of Ian Parry, who died in Romania, young photojournalist. And from that, there was no looking back, really. Started working for the Sunday Times and shooting documentary photography, and looking for trouble and, trying to make interesting stories, finding my way and kind of teaching myself what photography and photojournalism were, really. I never studied photography I never studied photography. So it was kind of fumbling my way, by taking pictures and seeing what worked and looking at what I liked and trying to do something similar. And I guess in the end of the 90s, I started a project, a kind of long-term project about the war on drugs, and I spent a lot of time in Colombia and Mexico, Bolivia, Peru, doing a project about the collateral damage of the war on drugs and how both sides were effectively being funded by America. So that's kind of interesting and kind of got me into some scrapes and made some good pictures and enjoyed doing that. And then over time, the work's changed. I did a long-term project called Unseen Waterloo, which was a very conscious effort to move away from this documentary work to do something a bit more considered and a bit more kind of in the art world, shall we say. And that it was a series of portraits shot over 5 years on the anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo, on the battlefield of Waterloo. And it was reenactors who were there replaying the battle. And Waterloo's kind of interesting because it was the last big conflict before the invention of photography. So when we think about that battle, we kind of think about it in terms of Wellington and Napoleon, the kind of big, great men of history. And, we've got the portraits of them. And we don't have the pictures of the actual men who fought in that battle. So just kind of 40 years later or so, during the American Civil War, we've got lots of pictures of the young kids and the men who fought in that war, because basically photography democratized portraiture. So before they'd go off, the Confederates or the Union Army, they would go off and have their portraits made for their families. So we've got the pictures of those young soldiers. So I thought it was kind of interesting to explore what the faces of Waterloo might have been like. So that was kind of a big project for me. I did, be doing a bit more commercial work, but so just recently I've just launched this new platform for photographers to try and kind of swap prints with each other.
That's quite a lot. I mean,
That's not that quite a lot. That's a hell of a lot, and a little bit like, I'm not going to lie, that's living our dream from university. To be fair,
so we both met at Newport, so we were the documentary course. So the start of your career was what we were aspiring to as students, and to hear you say that you were essentially self-taught. You never formally studied photography, and we were on, not at the same time, but a bit later on, the most prestigious documentary course basically going. That's a hell of an achievement for you to be up against all these people who do have more photographic experience or training before you went to Afghanistan. That's quite a thing.
I had been working for student newspapers and things like that. It's not, the Afghanistan thing wasn't the first time I picked up a camera, but, it was, and, I had kind of, I don't know, I guess I just had a desire to give it a go. I studied philosophy at university, so it's not like philosophy really set me up for a particular career. It was, well, if I don't have a go at being a photographer, I might always kind of regret it. And, I have to admit, a large part of it was just looking for adventure, and, taking a camera with me kind of justified going out there and, having, putting myself in situations that, I shouldn't really be in.
So, I mean, the camera tends to be a sort of a key or a portal to a different way in, isn't it? I mean, I think it was Diane Arbus who talks about that, and the idea that she uses it as a way to get through. Tom's just told me to keep going. He's just had a technical difficulty. He'll be back. He can edit that out. But yeah, it's that kind of interesting idea that you can go places and do things with a camera that you wouldn't ever be able to do just as I just want to go here and see these things.
I think that, and I think the having a camera and the kind of sense, the invincibility of youth, or the belief that you're invincible when you're young, were the things that really enabled me to go and do it. It's it's like I'm horrified now to kind of look back at some of the things I did and just think, oh my god, it's like part of me thinks it's the world's changed and it was a slightly more innocent world during the 90s, and met sticky ends, haven't they? I look back at what I did and just honestly can't believe that, I thought it was a good idea ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's that, like you say, it's the invincibility of youth. There's no way anything bad's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's it was. I got into, and I always believed that I could talk my way into a situation and talk my way out of a situation, and that it was just a question of them trying to just be reasonable, and I could always get out. But honestly, it's way of thinking.
Yeah, but I mean, they say it was in 1994. It was a different world, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I think it was, and I think it's a lot harder. I think it's a tougher world out there. It's people are more resistant. Everyone's a photographer now, so the idea that you'd let anyone in, and everyone's kind of a little bit more suspicious, and the fact that everyone sees everything. So, for example, did a project with gangs in Medellin in Colombia, and Medellin. This was just a few years after Pablo Escobar was killed, and the gangs in the city had kind of degenerated into just fighting factions and just trying to petty hoodlums, trying to control different barrios. And it was just, at the time, it was the most dangerous city in the world. And you'd go to the cemetery, and it was like First World War graveyard full of young men, in their late teens and early 20s. And it was horrendous. But I'd go up, we'd spend a bit of time trying to get in with this gang, and they'd so we'd got a few contacts through local pastors who were trying to make peace deals and things like that. And we got some way in, but the question is then just getting the camera out. Now, obviously, they're all taking selfies all the time of each other and posting them and doing all that sort of stuff. So it's be a different dynamic. But in those times, what I did was something similar. I had a Polaroid, so I took a Polaroid along and then just took a group picture of them and some portraits, and actually gave them the Polaroids in order to kind of break down that kind of. Because once they'd got a photograph or had their photograph taken, it's a much shorter step then to actually, get the Leica and just do a couple of, more meaningful frames that, were keepers for the project. So, yeah, and I don't know. I don't know how that dynamic would work, whether there'd be like worry that you'd get, you'd start posting straight away. And, it's kind of, that's a weird world now.
Yeah, I think it's changed the way that sort of documentary photography's shown. I mean, we've talked about this in the past. We started in, oh God, too many years ago now, 2006, was it?
Yeah, it
Tom?
was, yeah.
Yeah. So 2006, we sort of entered the world of photojournalism documentary as naive 18, 19-year-olds.
And we were to change the world, weren't we?
Oh yeah, we were gonna definitely change. Every bad thing was going to be changed by photography. But yeah, we sort of started our degrees in the world you're talking about, the photographing the gangs, the going to Afghanistan. That was very much where it started. And by the time we were finishing the degree, it wasn't the time of magazines and the Guardian supplements and things like that. It was the time of it being art or nothing, essentially.
Yeah, the documentary photo book was now the goal.
And I think that's even that's gone now. It's become digital in most cases, I think.
Yeah. It is weird because even when I started, there was kind of everyone was proclaiming the death of photojournalism. It's like probably around 95, 96 was the first time I went to Perpignan. And, I just remember like, I think it was there was a magazine there, French Photo or something, and they were, talking about the death of photojournalism then, it's like, oh my God, and I was coming into that and the older photographers would say, oh, it's not like what it, it's not what it used to be. And it's, it's like, well, it looks all right to me. And it was for a while. And then the market changed and changed very quickly. It was, so it was all over in a blink, really, because it was all going very well. And I guess around that time, 2006, wasn't it, that the market started changing and things moved off the printed page. And I think the Sunday Times magazine had been moving that way for a bit. The independent magazine was great before. By 2006, it wasn't. And the money was just going. The first time, 95 or 96, when I first won the Ian Parry, I just went to the Sunday Times office, and Aidan Sullivan showed me this filing cabinet full of photographs that had been commissioned and paid for, and just never they'd paid for photographers to go around the world shooting amazing stories, Magnum photographers, network photographers, really the best photojournalists in the world just going off and shooting stories, and the Sunday Times had bought them and then just never actually got around to running them. And maybe they ran them one day, but now they wouldn't even commission you to go around the corner to shoot a portrait of someone unless they knew exactly what issue it was going to go in, and you probably less than they would have done for a day's shoot back then. So it is a very different world. I mean, and I guess my work changed in response to that. In 2001, I got a commission from GQ magazine to do a story about Mario Testino, the fashion photographer. And, the idea was that, it was like he had a big exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery.
I remember it.
Okay, so, very different world to the one that I was interested in and the one that I'd grown up in. And, I was very much, used to working on my own, just traveling with a small bag full of film and, a couple of cameras, lenses, and that was it. And, then, he'd have big teams and, be traveling in luxury and in style around the world. And so the idea was that, it was someone who covered conflicts, covering the world's most glamorous fashion photographer. And that was interesting and opened new doors for me. And after doing that sort of work, the reportage work in Colombia and Afghanistan, then doing fashion shows in Paris just was a breeze. Honestly, I couldn't believe people were paying me to more handsomely than going off and hearing bullets whizzing above your head, just to shoot models in Paris. It was just like, really? But yeah, that was a kind of a different direction. It was fun, and kind of those two worlds collided sometimes.
Sounds almost surreal, to be fair.
It
go
was,
from
yeah.
yeah.
You'd literally come back from like doing a trip, like the gangs, or I'd been on operation with the Marines in Colombia trying to blow up cocaine labs, and then 2 days later I'd be in Paris or London or Los Angeles shooting a fashion behind the scenes on a fashion shoot.
Yeah. Do you reckon that the change was including the whole mobile phone revolution as well? I mean, I'm going down a rabbit hole, sorry, but do you reckon that had something to do with it?
I think it was a lot of things. I think the mobile phone revolution, I think that was probably a bit later, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think the iPhone came out in 2000 and the iPad came out in 2009, didn't it? The iPhone would have been a bit before that. So,
I think there was,
but to actually get a proper mobile phone that you could use for pictures, and it was still a few years away, wasn't it? It was probably the early 2010s.
Yeah, I think
but the internet did change things, because it changed distribution, and so suddenly that whole model of the gatekeeper agencies changed. So instead of having these agencies which had different models, some of them were owned by photographers, weren't they? And then there was things like APG and Cat's Pictures, who had great photographers like Tom Stoddard on them, and they'd get commissions, they'd really rep photographers, and then that model died again quite quickly, because as soon as distribution became digital, they didn't really need the agencies anymore, because part of what the agencies did was just copy your pictures and keep them on file and then send them out, sending bikes around, and it was a logistical and organizational thing as much as anything.
Like once the internet comes along, just
by
the go on, Tom. I can see you waiting to dive in there.
Well, I'm just, because you're talking about sort of that tech revolution and how that impacted the printed media and the newspaper industry and so on. Did that shift maybe lead towards your interest in the print swap? So the idea of the printed image.
I think there's kind of, I wouldn't say directly. I think the print swap thing came from a very precise moment when I was looking at a wall, and just there was a gap, and I was like, if only I'd got a print to put up there. I'd really love to put a print up there, and it reminded me of David Hearn from Magnum talking about how he'd done swaps throughout his career. He was one of the mentors on the Well Pressed Masterclass I attended in 2001. And he just talked about it then. And it was literally 25 years later on, that conversation came back to me, and suddenly kind of started burning in my brain, thinking, actually, it's like, why don't we do this? Yeah, if I'd swapped 2 prints every year for my career, I'd have like a collection of 50 photographs, which would be a start. My house wouldn't feel as empty, some walls wouldn't feel as empty, and it would be a way of remembering the photographers I'd met along the way. A print swap is a slightly different proposition in the sense that it's a platform that we're doing it online, and so you might not know the photographer, but it's about surrounding ourselves with photographs that inspire us and that we want to live with, because I think we obviously see more photographs now every day than we ever have done, and most of them we just scroll past. And I think I've always wanted to be surrounded, like most photographers, surrounded by photographs that actually do inspire me and mean something. And so much photography now doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I was seeing that the doom scroll images, and
Mm.
you can take a picture of everything any second. And
Well, exactly. And, and it's so easy to post and forget. How often do you ever kind of find a photograph that you kind of really connect with on, your tiny little screen?
so we talk about this, and I've talked about this previously, the actual printing out and having of a physical image is...
That is another part of it, the
Yeah.
physicality of it, because that is the other thing that really changed. Because obviously, so you guys were still printing and developing film when you were at Newport, yeah?
Still am.
Still are.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I meant was you started in a pre-digital.
Oh, yeah.
We were very much in that overlap, really.
Yeah.
Right. Because
So,
I
yeah,
think
we
there's
had a
something in
few.
that, isn't there? That, if you learned your trade during that time where photography was a physical thing, photographs were a physical thing. You held a photograph, you made a photograph in your darkroom, with your hands. It has you have a different connection to it, don't you? Than if all you've ever done is shoot it on a digital camera, uploaded it onto a screen, and then put it onto your phone for other people to look at. It doesn't touch the soul, that does it?
No.
And I think that's what prints do. It's just having them in your physical space.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the analog records or anything like that, that there's a process of something being physically made and physically created. And I think, when you make a print and we used to take them to crits, and you bring a box of work prints. And I'll be honest, there's boxes of work prints in my loft that I can't throw out.
Yeah.
There's nothing special, the little 5x4 black and white work prints that are no great piece of work, but I can't bring myself to throw them out because they're physical. Whereas I can delete files all day long.
Well, exactly.
And so you do end up with these boxes of them sitting around.
Yeah. I need to get a new box, actually. My current one is starting to overflow.
Put them in the loft, then your wife won't tell you off. That's my lesson learned.
No, I've got a storage unit which because we had a big clear out during lockdown, and I've got a storage unit. I do mean to go through it, but it's that thing, once it's out of sight, it's kind of out of mind, isn't it? And it's it will be a joy to go through it, years later, and just discover photographs that you just forget.
Yeah, this is it. You find that one shot that you go, I don't remember taking that, and then the memory comes back. Yeah.
So Sam, I'm looking over your shoulders. So we've got some prints there. Are these your photos, or these ones that you...
This one here is kind of Martin Chambi, the Peruvian photographer. I think he was in Cusco. And this is a beautiful print that my wife gave to me. Then this one here is another Peruvian photographer. That's Mario Testino's. He gave to Sabina. Sabina used to work for him. And then we have some other photographs, which I think I bought some in an auction, which were basically photographs from photographers who've been killed during Vietnam. So they're either of or by those photographers. And over here, which you can't see, and I'm not going to turn you around, we've got a couple of Tom Stoddards, which I very much love.
I think it's... Sorry, go on, Tom.
Go.
I was just going to say, it's the joy of having them around and being surrounded by quality images that make... I don't know, I find it helps me think about photography or make better images because I'm looking at something that has value, and you sort of surrounding yourself.
I think that's definitely true, and I think it's very easy to forget. Just life takes over, doesn't it? You forget that young passion that you had for photography, or you get disconnected from it. And I kind of guess that looking at this work that inspired me, when I was younger, hopefully that can, carry on doing that today, and, more pictures, just more inspiration. And just kind of motivate me to go out and shoot more and reconnect with what was always the biggest passion in my life.
So, it's interesting because I say we've been quite frankly discussing something very similar, more or less, this week, haven't we, Tom? Not on the podcast, but basically, I don't know if you've heard how this podcast came about, but long story short, me and Tom have a conversation pretty much every morning on our commute to work, which then became the podcast. So it was just us whittering about photography, and we're like, we should probably record this.
You're not in the same location.
No, this, yeah. So we're on the phone every morning,
hands free.
We're like, we should. Sorry, go.
Hands
free. Yeah, just before.
Right, so you're both driving in. Right.
Yeah. And so we drive.
Whereabouts are you? Whereabouts do you?
So I'm based in Lincolnshire, and Tom,
I'm
you're
based
down
in
south,
Buckinghamshire, so a lot closer to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in Lincolnshire? Whereabouts in Lincolnshire are you?
Literally Lincoln.
Oh, Lincoln. Okay.
Lincoln. Yeah. So we're about a 45-minute commute, and that's how this podcast came into being.
Okay.
Because it was like people may want to listen to us, they might not, but we thought we'd put it out there. But we've been discussing this idea of that you have the work life and you lose the connection sometimes to the images or the photography, and you have to kind of recapture that spark, which is sort of what you were discussing, looking at the images.
I think that's true. And I think, yeah. And, I think inevitably photographers, the passion kind of dips and wanes at certain points in your life, for various reasons. And, it could be that you've just come off a long-term project and you just need to not shoot as much or think about shooting in a different way. And part of that is that, you take a break and you start approaching photography differently. Like after I did spend some time in the kind of fashion world, I decided that I want to take a different approach with my photography. And that's one of the reasons I started getting into kind of more lit portraiture. But that was gradual. I went off to Kazakhstan and did a project about eagle hunters. And that was, a kind of very, much more staged, but not lit. And that was, very much a kind of transition. Like, okay, so this is still documentary because, I'm not really setting anything up. I might be positioning people, but, it's not, it's still truthful, it's not fiction, but, it's not kind of reportage in the sense that I'm not capturing moments. And it was just that, like, I guess from spending that time in the fashion world, I looked at and started appreciating all photography in a slightly different way. So, I used to be very arch and like think that, I can't interfere with the frame or what I'm shooting, and I've got to tread lightly and make as little impact on what's going on in front of me as possible. And over time, that changed, and I thought, well, there are other ways of telling stories. Yeah. So, and I think that I've rambled on a bit and deviated from where we were, but I think the idea is that you take a break from what you were doing, and you can start thinking about photography in a different way and approach it. There are many different projects I'm interested in doing, but part of what holds me back is like, well, am I being true to myself as a photographer if I do that? Because that's essentially a still life project. I've never shot still life. It's like, is that who I am as a photographer, or am I just I overthink things. Sometimes I should just shoot. But
this is a platform for it, honestly.
Yeah,
this is the right place to discuss.
Yeah, it's just like it is that whole thing. It's like, well, being a generalist or a specialist in a field. I feel that I have. I'm quite general. I don't think I only shoot black and white kind of documentary, but should I experiment more, or should I try and, keep the, not if not the subject, like kind of the methodology similar?
I think a good example of that is Alex Soph. So, he has a very iconic style, and it's that very formalized portraiture. It's documentary, but as you say, in terms of what you do with the eagle hunters, it's not reportage. It's quite stylized. And then I want to say about 5 years ago, he basically kind of threw his whole methodology on its head, and he was doing fast-paced black and white with flash, and it was very un-Soph. But it was that opportunity to he's very well established. Why not mix it up? Why not try something different? You are allowed to shoot still lifes.
Yeah. Yes.
So I've just
I think the thing is shoot it and don't put it out there unless you're happy with it. I guess is the secret, isn't it? I was like,
shoot for the sake of it and enjoy.
Shoot for the sake of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
I kind of have been thinking recently actually that I really regret getting rid of my film cameras, and I very consciously did that. Probably 10 years ago. Like, I thought, okay, I'm done now shooting film, and I'm going to shoot digital. And I just kind of kicking myself. I don't know. It seemed the right thing at the time. I think I needed to buy a new camera, and I thought, well, if I sell these now, they might be worth something. And if I hang on to them, they'll probably be worthless. But it's probably wrong on that too.
Well, I've got a friend selling a Mamiya 7 if you're interested. So
Mamiya 7. That was what I shot the Eagle Hunters on. That is a beautiful camera. I loved the Mamiya 7. It was so fucking unreliable, but during that Eagle Hunter shoot, I actually had to for whatever reason, the shutter wouldn't release if the back was closed. So I had to shoot with the back ever so slightly open, but taped up so no light would come in, obviously. But it was -30 outside, so I was like fumbling around trying to change films, keep the back slightly open. I never quite worked out what the problem was. It could have been the cold. It could have been something going on and something was slightly stuck inside, because it was so bloody cold. But it was a great camera. Loved the pictures from that because it was like a big Leica, but an amazing negative.
Yeah. Biggest mistake of my life selling mine. Honestly, it was you're right. Amazing camera. Paid for my wedding selling it.
This is true.
Yeah, I still miss it. Anyway, yeah, but it was a remarkable air negative, not the most reliable camera. I agree.
Yeah. Well, did you ever have technical problems with it, or?
Yeah, occasional sort of just gremlins would be you'd shoot and you'd be like, okay, that's not going to work today. Fine.
Yeah, I don't. Did I? I think I took 2 bodies with me and to Kazakhstan that time, and it was like. But honestly, you'd be brave to go on assignment only with Mamiya 7. It's nice as a kind of a backup camera or a secondary camera. There are certain projects I took it on, when I thought, I'm going to need some landscapes here. So, I take that along to get some, really good quality landscapes. But, I think that Kazakh thing was the only time I really took it as my primary.
Yeah. Beautiful bits of kit. But yeah, I think we all kind of go through phases. They go, I'm going to sell all this gear. I don't need it. I'm never going to use it. And then 6 months later, something comes up and you go, yeah, should probably have kept that. I need that lens that I've now traded in.
The Nikon FE was one I always regretted selling.
There's always one. There's always something.
There's always one that gets away.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is a massive digress. Oh my God.
Sorry, I don't even know whose fault that was.
That's great. I'm sure that's what this podcast is about. It's like, just talking about cameras, talking about
sort of phototherapy.
The things we love about photography and things we hate.
Yeah, well, this is it.
I mean you're saying about
kind of MO.
You're saying about surrounding yourself with influence and so on, and I'm a big believer of that as well. So you probably, I don't know if you can see, but just there in my stairwell, I've got a lot of photographs. Now, some of them are ones that I've bought. Some of them are ones that I've had as an extra by buying a book and being one of the first in, the book sales kind of thing. Some of them are print swaps. Toby and I in the middle of a print swap, which we started, 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, my print's ready to go.
Yeah, I haven't done yours yet. So...
Yeah, I know.
That is one of the other reasons that I thought creating a platform for people to just make it easy to do swaps was, possibly a good idea because, you might love them, but photographers aren't necessarily the most, organized or, easy to kind of
pin down
to send a print. I did a print swap with a friend and, 18 months after he's had his, I'm still waiting for mine. And, and we live within 1 kilometer of each other. So
that's worse than us. At least we have to drive a couple of hours to meet halfway.
Yeah. But I'm not talking to him every day like you guys are talking.
No. No, we have a morning reminder.
So how does the app work? Talk me through it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's So it's an iOS app, on the App Store, and the idea is that you upload one or more pictures that you want to make a print. You kind of design the print, so you choose the paper, the borders, the size you want it, and you kind of create the artwork. You can create an edition, or you can have a open edition, and then once that's up there, any other user can see your artwork, see your print, and they scroll through. If they like it, they can request a swap. And if you like their work, they will propose one of mine. Will you swap this print of mine for this one of yours? And if you like it, you accept. It's low stakes. So if you don't like it, you can either turn it down or ignore it. That swap requests are only good for 48 hours. So you don't have to say a hard no to anyone. It will just kind of evaporate into the ether after 48 hours. If they have another print on there that you prefer, you can request to swap that one instead. And that's it. And then once the swap is agreed, both prints are sent to the print space in Shoreditch, where they're printed and shipped straight out to the person who you're swapping with. And the beauty is that if you are swapping with someone in America, the print will get printed in America. Your print will be printed in America and shipped straight from New York to wherever. No tariffs, no international shipping. And similarly in Europe, if you're swapping with someone in Paris or Germany, it gets printed in Germany, in the EU, straight to you.
That's brilliant. I have to say, I really like that idea.
So at the moment, we're still kind of building up a kind of collection of photographs and getting users on board. So, we have, a few hundred now. And the idea is that, once that number reaches the critical mass, there'll always be something on there that you'll find that you want on your wall.
So I was sitting listening to you describe it, and I was thinking it's almost like a dating app for images.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And this is very much the model that we had. And, literally that was the thing. It was like, well, one of the initial inspirations was, can we mash up Instagram and Tinder to try and, swipe left, swipe right? And, and in the very early stages, I developed a kind of user interface where you were literally, and it works on iPad. It was a bit fiddly for the phone, which is why if we ever get an iPad out there, I might do it like this. And it looks like a pile of pictures, but you swipe left or you swipe right on the picture, depending on whether you like it or not. And, that was just to kind of do the likes and things like that. So, it definitely has that. And I think and it's interesting because I think one of the things that we are coming up across is the kind of, there's nervousness that you might have on I've never been on a dating app, so I don't know. The nervousness you might have on a dating app, which is like, I don't want to ask them out because, what if I get turned down? Similarly, there might be a kind of kind of hesitancy to request a swap in case, that person turns you down. As I said, it's low stakes. It's like, what's going to happen? They didn't want to swap a print with you, so there's someone else that will.
Yeah. So I noticed the Instagram's on. It's on Instagram and Live as well now. I seem to remember seeing something pop up.
Yeah, on my feed. I've kind of. I am not an Instagram native at all, so it's all kind of been a very sharp experience for me trying to kind of do. I spent the best part of a year actually creating the app, and then just as we were going to launch, it became very clear that I actually need to start thinking about how to market this thing too, how to, get the word out. And it's like, oh God. So because of the similarities, the fact that it's on a phone, that you have a feed full of pictures, it seemed to me that Instagram was possibly a good port of call. But, Instagram's full of crap, isn't it?
Yeah. It is.
And it's a hungry beast.
It's a horrendous experience. and I've hated every minute of it. It was like, yeah.
I have to say, I think,
but I'm trying to persevere because I do think that perhaps there is some overlap with users of Instagram and people who might want to swap picture, who would use this sort of app.
yeah,
I think there is. I think there's certainly a community of sorts on Instagram of people who value the craft of photography, not just how the image looks for 2 seconds as they scroll up the screen, but and actually to want to look at it closer. And there's certainly, I mean, I'm very sort of heavily focused on darkroom printing, and I know there are others like me who use Instagram to showcase their work and their practice. So it does work. Another good place, maybe, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, is Photo. So Photo.
Yeah, no, we're on Photo as well. Actually, I've posted a few photos on there, and I love the cleanness of it.
Yes, yeah, same.
And it's I've also looked at Iris. Iris?
Yeah. I don't know that one.
That's some.
I'll send you a link for it.
Which is fiddly and kind of quite ugly. A bit kind of in your face. But the thing about Photo is that it's really nice and clean, but there's no contact information for any photographers on there. So it's maybe you can get websites on. I can't remember now, but there was definitely a limitation to how easy it was to connect with them outside of the app.
Yeah,
but I do like it, and I hope they do well. But it seems quite a pared down experience on there.
Yeah, I think they're having to compete with that Instagram monopoly on that kind of app. But like you say, Instagram's full of crap. That's the problem. But there's so much of it. You trawl through to find the good stuff.
Yeah, and they try to stay away from falling into that same trap themselves.
Because you do get dragged in. I don't know.
Yeah. And I guess, the other thing is, starting out on Instagram, in 2026, how do you create a presence for something like this, which is, people might not even know what they're looking for because, it's not an obvious thing. I'm not, it's not some guy, talking about street photography.
Yeah.
Which people know. If you start looking at street photography, you're going to get fed loads of more about street photography. But because print swapping doesn't have its own little niche, we're not there yet. But
give it time.
It's going to be interesting. But
just go all the podcasts you can and get them to share it on their socials.
I don't want to talk about the competition in front of you guys.
We have no competition. We swim around in the bottom shallow end. Everyone else is serious.
It's a nice kind of like guys down the pub kind of vibe, isn't it?
That's essentially what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
I think it was Simon Roberts who said that.
Oh right.
Yeah,
I've known Simon for years because obviously he won the Ian Parry a couple of years after me. So with and. Yeah, so he's been one of the people that I've been talking to throughout about this, and he was. I was kind of somewhat surprised about his immediate response because, he just got it straight away and really loved the idea. But part of me had thought, well, actually, given that print sales are such a big part of his business model and what he does, that actually maybe. He isn't necessarily the right kind of photographer. The right kind of photographer would be, someone who creates beautiful pictures and, maybe does the odd print sale, but, actually, isn't their main source of income or, a huge part of, where they, what they do, they might be editorial, they might be, posting, or they might just be, I don't know, so many different business. But I met a photographer the other day who said he doesn't make any money out of taking photographs. His whole shtick is making money from talking about taking photographs and making YouTube videos about taking photographs. Yeah. And, it just doesn't sell any photographs. But, he gets sponsorship for making these videos, and that's it. And it's just like, wow, that never even occurred to me that you could make a living out of doing that. Not really ever being a professional photographer, but just being a professional YouTuber who talks about photography.
Listen, I think there's a whole, like I say, a whole range of different revenue streams, I suppose, is the best way of putting it now from photography. We won't name names, but there's some people who run workshops and make a fortune out of them.
Honestly, the amount of workshops I've now seen on Instagram is just like, it looks like everyone's doing bloody workshops. And I guess part of me I never wanted to do that, because being a self-taught photographer that we discussed at the beginning, it's like, well, it's like, okay, I've got some experience and I've, done a few things, and it's very hands-on, and I'm sure that that's interesting to someone. I don't really want to be part of this business that, is trying to convince younger photographers that, they could be a photojournalist too, because it's hard.
Yeah. But I mean, when we left, I think there are 2 people I know from the time we were at uni who were working as photojournalists.
Right.
Very successfully. Anastasia Taylor-Lind and Ivor Prickett.
Oh, well,
So,
very successfully.
Very, very successful.
You're either at that level or you're nowhere at all.
Yeah,
okay.
That was it. But that was it. I can't think of anyone else.
Chloe,
can you?
I think Ivor's the winner of the Ian Parry, isn't it? It all
was,
comes back.
Yeah, he was. That was 2009, maybe
thereabouts.
But because thereabouts, he was sort of. I think he was just finishing as we were just starting, and he won it that year. Amazing work, but you, like you say, you're either here or there isn't a sort of a middle market anymore.
And God knows what it'd be like to start now.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to try and bear in mind that I operate in a totally bizarre academia world most of the time, and the photography is my passion, and I work on personal projects. I wouldn't want to try and make it my living now.
No,
I don't.
And I guess one of the reasons that I was able to do this print swap thing was I had a bit of time on my hands. Let's see how this goes. And, it's obviously, tech, but photography related. And, it's I still feel that it's amazing to be in this world, and to kind of, what a privilege it is to, just have done what I've done, and, not have a real job, and just really, make a living out of photographs. It's something that has always been a passion. And it's never really felt like work.
That's the same, isn't it? If you find something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That's the.
I really like the concept of it. It reminds me of the Art on a Postcards exhibition that I think is it Tate Modern hosts that, and you don't know the artists until after you've chosen your postcard and you bought it, and it might actually be a David Hockney, and I love that kind of that mystery in the print swaps. I put something up there, and I've got an account. I haven't added anything yet, but I've built an account, and it might be that someone wants to do a swap with me, and they're a completely unknown photographer, or it might be someone whose work I already admire and would love to have. So it's nice to have that possibility to be able to share your work in a whole new way.
Yeah, and one of the things that I decided was that actually on the feed you just see the works. You don't see any names or titles of the picture until you tap on it, and hopefully you'll gravitate towards work that genuinely engages you, rather than because you kind of you see someone's you recognize someone's name and thinks, oh well, they're a good photographer because I've heard of them, and they were at whatever gallery or something like that, or saw them in Photo London, so therefore it's like I should swap with them because they're the kind of people that I want to swap with. But I think there's a certain bit of that as well. One of the other things that and I think this might be of a kind of very British hang up is like kind of the status anxiety of It's like, oh God, what about if I put stuff up and no one swaps with me and stuff, what have you? And it's just like, yeah, that might happen, but again, it's low stakes. So what? It's I've swapped and had swaps that people didn't accept. For work that's in a book, and has been exhibited extensively, and was a Parry photo, and he didn't want to swap one of those. So it's everyone has to make a. And I think one of the things that I've realized is that there are so many different styles, and it's not only photography actually, because we've got some illustrators up there as well, and ultimately, it is going to be open to all visual artists. Photography is obviously my initial passion and where I'm coming from, so I'm really focusing on photography, but I don't see why it should be limited to photographers might want to put illustrations on their walls in the same way that illustrators might want photos on their walls. So, but there are a lot of different styles going up, and some pictures I'd be like, well, it's a nice picture, but would I want to live with it? And I think that's the key, isn't it? Finding pictures that you want in your life.
They've got to grab you, haven't
as
they?
well.
Yeah.
Oh, there is that. Yeah. Can we all take a moment to appreciate I didn't talk about Roland Barthes' punctum at all there? I really wanted to, but I didn't.
Now you have. You've done it now.
Well, it was just there. It was like, talk about Roland Barthes, throw it in. Talk about images and how they grab you. You've got to say it. Plus, if I don't say it, and my students do listen to this podcast, they will tell me that I should have mentioned it because I've made them listen to it and read it and engage with it.
And then it's a classroom test.
Yeah. So it's all right.
Do you think your students do listen?
I know my students listen. They're 17, 18-year-olds. And one of them has recently said, whenever I can't really get switch off, I put your podcast on. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a compliment. What you're saying is to go to sleep, you listen to me talk about photography. But
now it's getting creepy.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah. Basically, we bore her, but it's okay.
Sam, what do you look for in a print swap? What kind of stuff interests you?
That's a really good question. I still love black and white. Black and white, documentary style photography is still, the thing that I love to be surrounded by. So, and I guess those are the ones that I'd really gravitate towards, in the print swap. But I think, as I mentioned, my interest in photography has become a lot broader over the years. So while black and white might work in this room, there are other rooms in the house where we have color work. So nice landscape. I've got Simon Norfolk downstairs, so something that's sits along with those kind of his Afghanistan stuff. So it's kind of muted tones with that pop of color. But yeah, it's on the whole, I would say, I don't know how would you say this without. There's a lot of fucking ugly photography out there. So I was trying to say that diplomatically, and I just thought, well, there's no easy way to beat around the bush, is there really?
No.
It's like I was in Photo London last week, and there's some amazing photography, but also it's really, really art photography, which seems to revel in shitty exposures, harsh flash, and dodgy composition. It's just like I just don't get it really. So don't expect me to be swapping any of that.
So
the disposable camera
destroying when you see that stuff. Oh, don't.
Yeah.
That's one. I want to make pictures that look like retro, and you go, "What's retro to you?" Oh, 2000s. Yeah, shut up and leave. Get out.
Yeah, one of my students actually said that to me last month.
Yeah, painful, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But yeah, but that aesthetic, I agree. I dislike that aesthetic, and yeah, there is an awful lot of it around. I feel like it's doing the rounds at the minute.
Yeah, I tell you what, there was less of at Photo London than Parry Photo was tits and arse. It's Parry Photo just is got so many naked women, and you just think, okay, I kind of get the nude is a thing in art history
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But really, do we still, this is 2026, do we still need to see this?
Is it?
Just grow
Yeah.
up.
Well, it's become. I mean, was it the Tate that did? Do women have to be nude to be in art? Was that Tate? It is becoming. It's almost a pastiche of itself, is it not? Now,
yeah, I don't know. Apparently, yeah.
But yeah,
Anyway, did you guys go to the Photo London or?
You went in there?
We both
Did you
teach,
not this
so
year?
we never really get anywhere in that sense. I did
Right,
get to the Sony Photography Awards a couple of weeks back, though.
Any good work there?
It was a good mix. So there was some stuff which really left me cold. And it was, luckily there wasn't any disposable camera aesthetic, but there was a lot of just very formalized portraiture, which I've basically seen on the front cover of BJP for the last 5 years. And it was just this, I've seen so much of this style of color, soft pastel lighting that I didn't really want to see any more of it. But then I went into one room and I can't remember the name of the photographer off the top of my head, but I did reach out to him on Instagram, and his work wasn't very big, but it just drew me in across the room. It was just these beautiful photographs to do with a form of polo, but using the carcass of a goat.
Bushkasi. Yeah. Okay. So is it from Afghanistan?
No, it
Or
wasn't.
from that
It
part of the
was.
world?
Grab your phone. Go on. I'll allow it.
No, you can do it, because I think the Taliban, it's a big, if it's what I'm thinking of, Afghanistan has this sport which they play mainly up north, so maybe, near the Tajik border or somewhere like that. And but it's been banned under the Taliban, so I don't know whether, or it certainly was. I
Todd Anthony's his name.
Todd Anthony, okay.
And it was Bizkashi, his name of the project.
We'll have to sit this in the show notes, Tom.
Yeah, but yeah, the photograph that drew me in, if I can find it, I'll quickly show you. Yeah, was this one.
Oh, right. Yeah, wow.
And it was, I know, it was about a 20-inch print, which sounds quite big, but in that room, it was small compared to what some people have printed. And it just grabbed my attention, and it, for me, stole the show, with the exception of the Joel Mayovitz exhibit on the other side of the courtyard. But yeah, if I start talking about Joel Mayovitz, we'll be here all night.
We've done an episode on that. You can't have another episode on your meeting Joel Mayovitz.
Oh, sorry about the. This is what we didn't do it the other night on Tuesday night, because you would have just had loads of Arsenal fans outside.
Oh,
yeah. Because I'm just very not, is Islington, so it's super Arsenal around here, and like they were singing and dancing until 2 a.m. So
yeah, probably not what you need for the background. Not conducive to highbrow photography talk.
No, I'm going to have a look at Todd Anthony's stuff, because seeing that, there was a project I thought about doing on Buzkashi, but in Afghanistan. I assume this wasn't shot in Afghanistan. If
no, it did.
It's
a
recent body of work.
Yeah, I did take a photo of the little blurb in the show. I can't find it now, but if I find it, I'll send it to you.
But I think, the project I was kind of thinking was more of a portrait series than this. This seems like really, full on action kind of. I just had a quick look. There's, loads of, right in the middle of it, and very kind of energetic. But I was thinking of a kind of portrait series of these guys after because it is very warlike. It really has that kind of energy and power on horseback, and so kind of portraits of these guys sitting on horses afterwards, with some sort of playing background, I always thought was a good thing. But then, another one of my ideas I never did anything about.
Kind of imagining,
you just write them down,
something like George Rogers' photos of the wrestlers. Those portraits that he did.
Yeah, that's. I was thinking even more stylized than that, actually, because those are great pictures, but they do have that kind of. They still have a very reportage-y feel about them, don't they? And they are. I was thinking, maybe something a bit kind of quieter and more static, with maybe almost even putting up a backdrop and shooting them against that, with popping a bit of light in there. And I don't know, that was the idea. But just trying to imagine how to execute that in northern Afghanistan, would be, I don't, as I say, you couldn't do it now because it's illegal, the sport. But this was obviously an idea that I had before the Taliban came back. So.
I have a mental image of it looking a bit like, do you remember the Sunday Times thing David Bailey did with people from different walks of life, different working careers? He did, like, that's how I imagine it. We were discussing it. And that was a plain background, but then with tools of their trade, essentially. And
yeah, but obviously kind of something like, maybe if, for that Waterloo project I mentioned before, I did for the last year, I shot guys on horseback. So I kind of did, portraits of guys on horses. So that we had a really big set. And, this was kind of interesting because, I'd done 4 years before, and we'd taken a kind of set up a little pop-up studio in this field in the middle of Belgium. Well, in the middle of a field in Belgium. And, it was tough, the weather-wise and, what have you. But to actually try and do it on a big enough scale to actually get a horse in there as well was a whole different thing. And trying to make the lights on the horse and the guy riding the horse consistent with the rest of the project was kind of quite ambitious as well. But, it worked out. But it's so it was kind of something similar to that I was thinking. But, like the guys that I was shooting last time were kind of staged, pretend warriors. And these would be the kind of Central Asian equivalent, I think. Yeah, I'm going to go and look at Todd's work, and it looked really interesting.
So we've been talking, I had to just swing on and have a quick look. I knew I recognised you talk about the Afghan falconers. I was seeing those images. I've just had a quick look. It was the ones I was thinking of. I'd seen your work with those before. Right. I really like those, actually. Oh, good. They're on the print swap app.
Yeah, well, they certainly can be. Yeah, I had a bit of a clear up the other day because I kind of created a few different kind of accounts in order to be testing things. Yeah. So I need to check whether they're still up. But I'll definitely put a couple of those on.
I shall go and register, as I was going to anyway, but I shall go and do it more rapidly now.
Well, we're going into half term now, aren't we? So we've got time to actually go through our hard drives and choose stuff to upload.
Yeah. That is the thing, isn't it? Because, we've got negs that, sit in folders, and prints that sit in boxes, and prints on, pictures on hard drives. And, really, if you could turn those into something that would be essentially someone else's picture on your wall. Yeah. Because you don't really want to have your own pictures on your wall, do you?
No.
I've got a couple of mine, but they're not the things that bring me the most joy. It's other people's work that brings you more joy than your own. And it's just like, well, really, can photographers afford to go to galleries and buy prints at gallery prices? Unless you know the photographer, who might be able to do you a deal or something like that. But the idea that you could then use your creativity to swap your print for someone else's, and then both parties are happy.
It's returning to a democratization of photography, isn't it? It's the sort of the same way that photography made everyone able to make their own portraits.
I'd like to think so. I'd like, really, but it's a new behavior that we're after here. This isn't something people are kind of used to doing. So let's see whether we can convince enough people that there's something in it.
Fantastic. I think, are we on our time, Tom, or are we all right?
I think we are getting there, definitely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Well, in that case, I'm going to say, Sam, thank you. That was really interesting. I knew of the app because when you launched it and Simon Roberts shared it out, and that's how I found out about it. I haven't been on there properly to, sort of really explore it, it sounds even simpler to work with than I imagined. The fact you've got it all tied in with the print space, so brilliant lab. I've used them for printing on and off for years as well. So I know they're good. Means that, this is all tied in, so, everyone's details are nice.
The idea is that
it's
it's
great.
literally seamless. You kind of like press request swap, they kind of have a look, accept swap, and that's it. As long as you've got your address in there and a way to, you only ever pay for printing your own picture. So it doesn't matter whether you are swapping with some guy over in Brazil. You don't pay to ship your picture to Brazil. You pay for the shipping to you and the printing of your picture. So if you're swapping a 10 by 8, you only ever pay the cost of printing a 10 by 8. So if someone really loves your work and, is prepared to swap a, I don't know, a 2016 for your 10.8, then, they pay for the shipping, the cost of that printing that one. So, there are lots of decisions to be made about, you might get a bigger or smaller print than the one you're swapping, but, if the work talks to you, it's, size isn't everything.
That's where the value is.
Yeah. Thank you. I say, honestly, I'm going to go sit and set up an account now. That's before I fall asleep on the sofa for, the end of the day.
I hope you guys have a relaxing half term. And
well, thank you very much.
So your kind of your students are doing their exams now, are they?
Yeah, the A levels are, and it's busy. It's busy time, we call it, between now and end of next month.
But they would have submitted all their projects by now, would they? Hopefully.
Yes, but all the coursework's in, all marked. We'll wait for the moderators now. That's the fun bit.
Right. And how much is there in a final exam? There is a final exam as well, is there?
So for A level, it's all project based, which is brilliant.
It's all project based. Okay.
Which does make life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yours is the same, isn't it? For the
I teach in the college, so we've got no exams at all for photography. It's purely on coursework, and my students, their final deadline is tomorrow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if they're listening to this, your deadline's passed.
Right.
But it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much for your time. And please keep in touch.
Thanks for your interest, and good luck on the print swap.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing your work out there.
Yeah.
You will be there soon.
In the next 20 minutes.